Are you still chasing dreams you had as a kid, and now, do you really want those things, or is it just what you've told yourself for so long? Well, in the latest, in our Reset series, I sat down with a Cleveland native who went on to find stunning success as a Hollywood writer and producer, but realized he needed to take a step away from what he thought he'd always wanted. How he changed directions? Here's my conversation with Dan O'Shannon.
When I first started TV in the 80s, we used to write our characters to be funny or have certain personalities or whatever. If you were writing The Odd Couple, Felix was neat and Oscar was messy, and that was enough. And then what happened, and I was one of them, I was one of the younger writers who were constantly in therapy and starting to apply what we learned to therapy to our characters more. Now, some of the older writers were already doing that, but it wasn't just a common thing. And so, I realized, I have all these different things going on inside of me. Well, the characters must too. And they didn't wake up, decide to go to Cheers and make America laugh. They don't know they're on TV. The characters don't know they're in a comedy, and they never will. They feel what they feel, and they're being genuine. And so you have to get into their therapy. And so now I was on a reboot of The Odd Couple, and all the writers were sitting around going, well, why is Felix so neat? What is it that he feels out of control of, that he feels he needs to control? What's he afraid of? And then Oscar, why is he messy? Why does he not care? Is he rejecting something? Is he protecting himself in some ways? Is he expressing anger? And that's how we write now. And all the writers' rooms do this to an extent that back in the 80s we never did. But there was this evolution as all of us were going through therapy and starting to apply it like crazy to our writing. So I could talk about therapy all day.
So intention came to be a big part of the conversation in writing as opposed to just the dialogue.
Oh yeah, absolutely intention. Sometimes young writers will have characters do very silly things or funny things just because they are funny to see the characters do those things. And I'll say, well, why is the character picking up this, what a crazy hat and putting it on? And the writer will say, because it's funny. I say, well, it's funny to us, but the character has no reason to do that. Why is the character choosing to do that? If on Frasier, for example, he's going to put on a funny costume or whatever, he's going to try to disguise himself in a drugstore for some reason, he doesn't do it just because it's funny. He does it because two things. One is, let's say that he's in this drugstore and he's told his boss that he was going to be working on some big story for his boss, and then the boss comes in and sees him. Well, he doesn't want the boss to see him because he'll be embarrassed, okay? We've all tried to avoid being embarrassed and ending up doing things that were twice as embarrassing. We've all done that, so we can relate to it. So already we're ahead of the game because we can relate to his motives. Two, we have to make sure that he has no other easy way out. Because you could look at it, well, why doesn't he go out the back door? Well, we have to make sure that outside the back door is his dad or girlfriend or somebody coming who thinks he's somewhere else too. We have to block the avenues of sane behavior. I will do the funny thing because I'm afraid of being exposed. I'm afraid of being seen. I'm afraid of being embarrassed. That's the psychology. Now we're free to have the funny stuff happen, and that's what we all learn. It's all about the intent of the character and understanding and make it clear to, even if we don't say out loud to the audience, he's afraid of being embarrassed. We need the audience to just understand that without even knowing they understand that. As long as we make it clear for the back of their head, the front of their head can enjoy the comedy. But they're not always. But the audience is not always consciously aware of the psychologies. They know it just feels right. Mm-hmm. It feels right that he did that in that moment, and I understand it, and it's silly and it's funny. In my late 40s, I was very, very lucky because I had succeeded early, and I'd always wanted to be a writer when I was a kid. And what I understand about myself now is that I wanted to be a writer because I wanted people to think I had things worth saying. And so here I was with my name on television back when there were 3 networks, and so millions of people got to see me or quote me or whatever. And a lot of that was my own neediness and my own wanting to show people who never thought I could do it and that sort of thing. And then at some point in my 40s, I was driving to work and I thought, well, I showed them. I did it. I don't need to be compulsively funny all the time so people like me. I have a resume that says that I did that. I've got my diploma. I did it. And so why am I doing this now? And I had to really think, why am I going to work on a TV show now? I did it. I've done it for years. And I satisfied the little boy in me who wanted to show everybody that I could be funny. So why am I even doing it now? What do I, as an adult, want? And I had to really think, because I could have easily just quit television at that point. And I think, why is it worth continuing to create things? And what I came to was that when I was a kid, I ran away to TV because TV was the thing that kind of got me through childhood. I had a pretty lonely childhood. I came from a family where we were all very different, and I was very creative, and no one in my family kind of got that. And so I watched TV because there were cartoons and sitcoms, and that meant that there were grown-ups that were making them. So it wasn't just all the serious people who said you have to go to college and you have to do this and you have to do that, and you're an idiot for wanting to be funny and draw silly pictures or whatever. There were adults that they were kind of saying, come out here, you're not alone. And so now when I write, it isn't about showing people what I can do, because you can write something millions of people see. Thousands of them will forget it the next day. Some of them might remember a joke or two, but there's going to be a couple people out there that watched your thing or saw what you wrote at exactly the right time in their life when they needed to hear it, and when they felt like they weren't being seen, they get to hear a voice saying, you're not alone. And so that's what I'm doing. It's kind of like lowering the ladder for the person behind me. You know, somewhere out there might be someone who benefits from something I wrote. I may never meet them, but that's okay. You know, that was my that was a big kind of then I was okay to write again.
So okay, so you stopped. Did you stop writing for a minute?
I did take a little time off. You know.
And what did you do in that time off?
I felt sorry for myself. I was going through a divorce, and I was really being hit with the question of who am I? It's like I know who I had made myself into, but I made myself into that person by following the blueprint of myself I wrote when I was a kid. You know, it's like I'm going to be the kind of adult that had da-da-da-da-da-da, and I just went and did it because that was the plan I gave myself. But at some point I thought, well, I don't exist just to follow the blueprint I wrote when I was 8. You know, it's like, what do I want now? What do I care about now? What did I miss while I was busy writing made-up worlds? I was also a little resentful of writing because it's extremely immersive, and it's not like you're just daydreaming for a living. You're daydreaming in 3 dimensions all the time. Okay, Phil and Claire are going to have breakfast on Modern Family. If she's making breakfast, he comes in the kitchen wearing a grass skirt. Okay, he keeps trying to point it out. She won't give him the satisfaction of noticing, or maybe she does notice right away and she says, or maybe the audience doesn't see it and she's acting funny and we wonder why. So you're thinking of all these possibilities. Then you pick one, and then you go to the next thing, and then all these different possibilities, and you pick one, and you do that. You do that for hours and hours a day. Back in the 80s, 90s, even the aughts, I would work, 15, 16, 24 hours sometimes on a show, because sometimes you had to rewrite the whole show by the next day so the cast could rehearse. If a show didn't work, you had to rewrite an entire show. So you are pounding your head against these fake realities for all the time. And at some points in your life, when you're in your own life, you look around and you go, I've missed a lot of this because I was living in the Modern Family universe or the Frasier universe or whatever. And it really affected my thinking in a way I wasn't able to recognize, in that when you're writing TV, when I was growing up, I was going to escape into TV. I had a family, but I was going to escape. And then all these different worlds that you're creating, okay, the characters could do this, but what if they did this? Is this better? But what if they did this? And so now I'm in my real world, and I'm happy, and I've got a family, but I'm looking out the window. What if I lived there? What if I moved here? What if I had this job? What if I was married to this person? What if I wasn't married to... That same habit of mind that had been pounded into my head since I was 23 is when I started in TV, was unfortunately the same mode of thinking that I applied to my real life. What if I was over here? So nothing was ever good enough because there were always all these different roads, And so I was really kind of cracking up in my 40s, and it really took destroying my life in order to rebuild, like breaking the bone to re-heal it. And in a way, that's what I had to do. I broke my career for a little bit. I broke the marriage. And for a while, I just wandered around, and I was on antidepressants, trying to find a bottle of something that would help me pill-wise, and quite depressed and anxious. And all I wanted was clarity. I just don't understand anything anymore, and that's because I had built a person instead of growing into being one, I think. Now I write for a better reason. When I do write, I still get sunk into projects to the exclusion of everything else, which is why I'm late today, and that's fine. And I understand myself better, and that's good, I think.
But it's also brave, because there are some people that have a very hard time being that introspective.
I think a lot of the writers I know get to a point like this at some point, because we are constantly writing. And we are also the character. We're also writing ourselves while we're writing other people and writing characters, and it just infuses your head. And the more you talk about the character psychology, the more you recognize your own. But I will also say that I'm grateful that I had the luxury of being introspective and to stop for a little while. A lot of people don't. A lot of people, that's just, I've got to get food on the table. I don't have time to be introspective and think about what are my motives and what is the psychology behind what I do, and there's the child version of me. They don't have that. And I could see where people would hear me talk about that stuff and just hate me, you know, because they don't, it's a luxury to live in a day and age and have the kind of life where you can stop and go, wait a minute, and kind of have your own reset that way. So I'm grateful for that. I'm grateful for the horror of it all. It was terrible. It was really terrible. I was suicidal for a while. The only reason I didn't kill myself at one point, because I was on an antidepressant that actually made me want to do it, is that I have a daughter, and I will never give her a dad that killed himself. Never. So that kept me alive. And work. I was able to keep writing sometimes. Like Modern Family was toward that time. I'd been doing that for 5 years. And I'd be a mess in my life, but then I'd go to work and start writing Modern Family, and it was easier for me because in the Modern Family world, Dan doesn't exist. My problems don't exist. My anxieties, and I could sink myself so much into the world when I was writing it. It was an escape from my world. But I did stop for a while, and I came back to Cleveland, where I mostly live now, and it's just, Cleveland is like very real to me, whereas Los Angeles is not quite as real to me. Yes, I had a life there, and I still have a life there, but there's something more grounded and solid, and when you talk to people, it isn't about made-up worlds or ratings or executives or the state of television or streaming or da-da-da. You're actually in it instead of just kind of like talking about it. And so somewhere in there is a reset.
But what is it that brought you back to Cleveland then? At what point can you take me into that moment where you realized, I have to get out of LA, I have to go home?
I think no matter how much I was ensconced in Los Angeles, I think there was a part of me thinking Ohio is home. And I know a lot of people from this area who feel that way. It's like we're all homing pigeons, you know. And I think that if the TV industry hadn't existed in Los Angeles, I would never have left Ohio. It's just that's where I had to go if I was going to do the work. But like I say, I think it's just in me to be back here, where there's real weather and thunderstorms and fireflies and all that other stuff. Snow is nice. Everyone hates me because I love snow, but I do. And
that's all right. They hate me for the same reason. I've been waiting for the snow.
Yeah. I did it gradually because while I was working at Modern Family, I bought a condo here, and I would just come to it on vacations and do writing or just see people and have dinners and walk around and just sort of breathe in real air again instead of the made-up air back there. And don't get me wrong, it's beautiful, but it was just I missed this. And it is like sort of replenishing something that I think I was missing, you know. I was dehydrated in some spiritual way, I suppose.
So is that when you went to therapy?
Well, I actually started therapy much younger. I started in my 20s, and that changed the way I wrote. That helped the writing, and it helped me to some extent. But I think a lot of times I was understanding it, but unable to sort of always take it in and I think I sort of needed to deal with a lot of stuff from my childhood. I just never wanted to deal with it. And I just sort of kept pushing it because I could.
Because you could get distracted,
yes,
right?
Easily distracted, plus I was successful, you know. And there was a time, so I remember, you know, I was making money and people were kissing up to me and I had a briefcase and a house and a wife. I must be a grown-up. I was a child, for God's sake, because I never really did the work to grow up. But all the trappings kept making me think I'd grown up, you know.
How old were you at that point?
Probably about 28, 29 is when I had my first house and my wife, and I was working on Cheers, and we had briefcases then, you know, so sure. And people would call me up and ask me to do this and appear at this, and can I, you know, write dialogue for this award show. I wasn't necessarily full of myself, but I was convinced that, and by the way, I always thought I didn't quite deserve it, and I still think that. But I think I thought I must have grown up because people were treating me like a grown-up, you know. And but I wasn't, and it took me a long time to realize that. And I always thought that I could think my way out of any problem, because in a script, that's what you do. Yeah. The character's getting a problem, and you have to think, what's the cool, creative way to get them out of the thing? Yeah. How do you fix it? I think I approached myself that way. I would think my way out of anything instead of just dealing with the feelings and sitting and letting them wash over me, whether good or bad or whatever, and really taking them in and working with the feelings. I think there's a mistake people make where they think that feeling sad, angry, depressed, anxious is bad. You should not feel these things. And here's all the things we're going to do to not feel this. We're going to exercise. We're going to eat right. We're going to take these pills. We're going to go to therapy. All because we want to not feel these bad things. Well, I don't know that we're meant to only feel one thing or one part of the spectrum. And I think maybe it's dangerous to treat bad feelings like the enemy that needs to be vanquished. You know, there's no default, just like there's no default weather. It's sunny, but it won't be sunny tomorrow. It's cloudy, but it won't be cloudy. There's no one weather. It's all changing. I think moods are like that. I think emotions are like that. And I think I was very much in the camp of I must not show anger, I must not express sadness, I will not cry, I will not do all those things because it's bad to feel those things. And I finally had to sort of make friends with all the worst parts of myself, and or what I thought were the worst parts of myself, and accept myself, I think, in a way that I was unable to when I was younger, because I was busy thinking myself out of every problem.
And you're so right about, sometimes we just have to sit in all those emotions, even if they're hard.
Yeah.
What did that teach you to do? I mean, what did you learn about yourself from sitting in those emotions?
I learned that I could survive them, and I learned that the world didn't end. Because when you're in this, it's sort of like when you go through a breakup and your heart is broken, and people say, time will heal, you'll feel better, and you know for a fact you will never feel better. This is it now. This is my reality, is I'm in horrible, horrible existential pain. And I think real depression, real anxiety brings that feeling of this is just it now. Because I cannot think my way out of it, there is no solution. And if there's no solution, I'm here forever. And that makes me more depressed.
There's a hopelessness when it comes to depression, right?
Yeah, and it's also, there's like, people are depressed, and then they get depressed about being depressed. People get anxious, and then they realize they're anxious, they get anxious about being anxious, and it just keeps building. And you can get out of it. That's what I learned, is that not only can I survive them, but I can accept these feelings as a part of my life without letting them take over, and not beat myself up if I feel anxious, not feel hopeless if I feel depressed. Yes, I'm upset about something appropriately because it is upsetting. And you know what? If I'm just not in a great mood today, I'm just not in a great mood today, but it doesn't mean the world is over. It doesn't mean that I'm now this for the rest of it. It doesn't define me. And that took a lot of learning, because I think I spent a lot of time running from conflict, even internal conflict. I don't want conflict at home. I'm going to write comedies. People are going to laugh. And yes, and I'd make them cry too, and this and that, but in a safe way. And I was running from my own inner stuff. But eventually it caught me.
Here you went and you did everything you said you were going to do, everything you wanted to do. You proved what you wanted to prove. And now that proving yourself is not so important to you.
Right.
And you come back to Cleveland. And what state of mind were you in when you came back? Did you come back and think, this is where I'm going to stay?
The success only afforded me the ability to appreciate living here in a different way, because I'm not scrambling to try to prove myself. I'm not in made-up worlds. I'm able now to. I'm just happy to be here. It lets me breathe, this place, and I like breathing, it turns out. And I recommend it. If there's a place you can go back to after you've done everything, go back. And I had to do a lot of things that people who retire. I'm basically retired, although I've been asked to do a show or two, and I might still do it sometimes. But I think, for the most part, I consider myself retired. And I had to go through a lot of that kind of, what does it mean? Who am I if I'm not a current writer? The references that I use, Modern Family, Frasier, they get further in the past every day, less relevant, and that doesn't make me less relevant. It just means that I'm relegated to a part of history. I'm part of TV history, and I'm proud of that. It's not TV the way people experience it now. It doesn't have the same meaning that it did back then. It meant a lot to a lot of people in its day, and I'm proud to have done it. But I don't want to hang on to that and say that's what I do. I don't really talk about those days much. Unless people ask me, I'm happy to talk about it. But I don't wear it on my shirt, unless I'm wearing like a Frasier shirt today. Thank God I'm not. But it's a neat thing I did, and I'm proud of it, but I don't carry it with me everywhere. I'm just sort of too busy kind of living real life. I mean, I still will make things, and I'll have projects, and I'll produce things or whatever, but that's just because it's fun, and I believe in the projects. It isn't about anything else now. It was just like, who am I without television? Who am I without writing? Who am I without show? Oh, I'll start where I started before, Ohio,
There's a comfortable familiarity to being here.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, it's not that I don't miss Los Angeles. I do. It was a home for me. I miss other writers. I miss being around a writer's room with the sharpest people in the world and just going back and forth and trying to surprise them and getting surprised. And there's a certain level of energy with that I miss. But at the same time, like I say, I just keep going back to it's real. You know, the sidewalks are real and the trees are real. And the trees, they don't have trees in Los Angeles. They have palm trees, but those are like telephone poles with beetle wigs on them. It's almost like I wanted to escape in the television when I was a kid, and I lived in this television show in Los Angeles. I mean, it was the Dan O'Shannon show. And I lived in that, and you know what? The credits are coming up, and now I'm back here, and that was a nice episode of TV. I'm happy to have been in it, and now, having done that, you know, what do I do here?
So you're still trying to figure out what it looks like here.
Yeah, but you know what? No rush. And also, I'm enjoying it along the way. I've always been goal-oriented. What's the end of the story? Okay, I can set up this, but I just need to know where the story's going so that I can, and even with me. And, well, I'll tell you a big revelation I had. It was when I was going through my divorce, and it really was a nervous breakdown. Every day, I would wake up. I had moved out from my marriage. I was in this little apartment. I was still a modern family at the time, but my life was falling apart mentally and everything. And I would wake up every day. What am I going to do? Am I going to go back to the marriage? Am I going to stay out of the marriage? Am I going to get divorced? Am I going to just move? Am I going to move out of town? Am I going to stay in television? And all day long, I would just beat myself up with these questions because it was my job to always have the answers for what the characters were going to do, including this character. And then there was this one morning that I woke up. Maybe this was the real beginning of a reset for me. I remember having this feeling like when you see in a movie like someone clearing off a table. And that feeling of clearing everything off and going, I don't know. I don't know the answer to that. I was never comfortable with the I don't know. It was my job to know. I don't know. Here's what I know. I'm going to get up and I'm going to get dressed and I'm going to go to Starbucks. I'm going to have a tall mocha with no whipped cream. I'm going to go to work and I'm going to do my job. That's all I know. And everything outside of that is gray. And if I am asked by a lawyer, if I am asked by my ex, if I am asked by, the people at work, my agent, whatever, what are you going to do? What do you want to do? I'm going to say, I don't know. And they're going to have to deal with it. I'm so used to giving everyone an answer. The world is going to have to take care of itself for a while. And I'm just going to have to do the little things I do to get through a day. And then tomorrow, and maybe miraculously, an answer will happen or the world will conform itself to me. You grow up at being asked crazy questions all your life, like, what's your favorite song? What's your favorite movie? And you usually have an answer. And I had to answer, but they were answers from when I was a year. It's like, what do I like now? What's my favorite color now? I always said blue since I was a kid. Is it my favorite color? Is it? Do I like this song as much as I did before? Am I just following old patterns? Who am I now? What do I like now? And the blank piece of paper that I became at that point was very attractive to me. Because I didn't know, and I didn't have a deadline to write the answer.
And deadlines are huge in your business.
Very, very huge. You always have to have an answer by the end of the week, and you have a paper due, and you don't have a teacher looking at it. You have critics and the world and the actors and the studio and the network. And this one, the biggest project that I could find was me. I didn't have a deadline, and so I figured I don't have the answers. The answers will come. I'm not going to try to force the answers into existence, and what I'm going to try to do is simply live until I know those things, and I will not worry about them. And so, do I know everything about myself? Do I still know, will I get married again? Will I have another family? Will I live in this place or that place or a house or a condo? I don't know. But in the meantime, I'm having a nice day.
One thing I've discovered about myself is I like to know what's coming next.
Yeah.
But of course we don't.
Yeah.
What do you say to people who are uncomfortable with that? I don't know.
You ever meet someone and your first impression is no. And then later in your life you find they're your best friend. And you remember, wow, when I first met this person,
Yeah.
I don't know is like that. I don't know is the enemy. Because I don't know would get me in trouble at work. I don't know would get me in trouble at home when I was a kid. You always had to know. And that comfort of knowing what was coming, at least I know that by Friday, blah, blah, blah. At least I know that this is going to happen. And you take comfort in that. And so what happens is I don't know becomes the enemy. And it shouldn't be the enemy. It is, in some ways, it becomes a friend. Sometimes the I don't know it gave me great comfort. It took so much anxiety off of me when I thought, I don't know. And not only that, but I don't have to know, and nobody has to have an answer today. And it freed me up a lot to not know. I would suggest that people who are trying to make friends with I don't know, start with I don't know today.
Fragment it.
Yeah, I don't know today. Maybe tomorrow I'll know. I don't know the answer, but I've got a whole day in front of me where I can do 20 different things, and some of them are pretty great, so, you know. It's hard to incorporate I don't know, but I think it's really valuable.